Hello everyone, this is Robin Armbrecht with Really Robin Stamps, and today we are going to be making an art journal. So welcome to my first ever video tutorial. We're going to make an art journal using the supplies that you have for your card making. So here's what you're going to need. You're going to need 6 sheets of Whisper White cardstock, you're going to need a piece of designer series paper that's 8.5 by 12 inches. You're going to need your paper cutter, a ruler, pair of scissors, and a corner rounder. And then you're going to need a bone folder, something to poke holes with like the Take Your Pick tool, 4 staples, and some adhesive. And then to finish it off, you're going to need a piece of ribbon and a 3/4 inch binder clip. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to take all 6 of the sheets of Whisper White cardstock and you're going to score them in half at 5.5 inches. So one of the reasons why I wanted to create this project is that I wanted to do something just different than a card. And during this time of the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm just needing to kind of work on some different projects and to do some relaxing. Okay, so now what you're going to do is you're going to crease the cardstock on that 5.5 inch score line, and you're going to crease it in both directions. And this will give you a really nice crisp fold on that score line. So I love journals. I love journals of every kind. And it's not that I don't have journals that I could use for this project, but I really liked the idea of being able to create my own journal and be able to create it with Whisper White cardstock, because as you know, when we're stamping or coloring or doing any of those things that we like to do in card making, the Whisper White cardstock provides the greatest surface for doing those things. So I wanted my journal to be able to use my Stampin' supplies. So now what you're going to do is you're going to put 3 pieces of cardstock together. And what we're going to do is create a section. So our journal is going to have 2 sections which are called signatures. And we're going to bind them together to create the journal. So I don't know if you've ever looked at how a book is created, but there's always a bunch of pages that are like attached together. Those are called signatures, and then they get bound together in the binding of the book. So you want to stack 3 sheets together, and with a ruler along that fold line, you're going to poke holes at 1.5 inches, 2 inches, 6.5 inches, and 7 inches. And what this is going to do is give you holes that are 1/2 inch apart, which is the size of a standard staple. So peel off 4 staples. Ultimately, you need 2 for each section. And what you're going to do when you get them off of your bunch of staples there, you're going to put them into the holes and then secure it by flipping your paper over. So where the ends of the staples come out, you're going to use your fingers to close manually, and then use your bone folder just to push the end of the staple into the cardstock. That way it doesn't get caught on anything. Then with your other 3 pieces of cardstock, stack them again. And you're going to do the same thing along the fold line. You're going to poke holes right into the score at 1.5 inches, 2 inches, 6.5 inches, and 7 inches. Insert the staples, flip it over, and then close the staples. First with your fingers and then press those ends down with your bone folder. So these signatures will close either way. So as I have it here, the ends of the staples are going to be sticking out and covered up by the binding instead of being open in the middle. But you can really close your signature either way depending on where you want the finished staple to be. So I'm going to have my finished staple on the inside. That way I don't accidentally, poke a finger or something in my art journal. So now our job is to trim what we call page creep. So you can see when you layer the 3 pieces together, that's the ends are not even on the end because of how they're stacked together. So you get the inside piece of cardstock is sticking out farther than the others. That's just called page creep. Some books leave it in if you look at the edges of a book, and then some get sliced off. So we're going to slice it off to make it look even. And the measurement you want to use is 5 3/8 inches. And you'll just trim off just a little bit from all those pages. I'm going to flip mine so I can get through all 6 of those sheets in 2 swipes. But if you have a guillotine cutter or a long arm cutter, you might be able to do that just with 1 swipe. And then we'll repeat again with the second signature at 5 3/8 inches to trim those ends. All right, so there's our 2 signatures. And now our job is going to be to bind them together so they will be part of one whole book. The best way that I found to do it very simply for this project with only 2 signatures is to use packing tape. So I just have some clear packing tape, and I'm going to get a piece that's slightly longer than the length of my binding. You're going to lay it upside down on your table and fold the end under and stick it to your table surface just so it doesn't wiggle around when you're trying to lay your paper down. And start with one of the binding edges of the signature. Just place it kind of right in the center, and then you take the next one and just bump it up as close as you can get to the next one. You could also use washi tape if you had a wide washi tape. The packing tape or the washi tape, whatever you use, is going to get covered up by another piece of designer series paper that'll make it look pretty. So it really doesn't matter how it looks. We just want these to stick together. So then you trim off the excess right up to the edge of the cardstock with some scissors. And then we're good to move on to the next step. So now that we have our sections bound together, the inside of our art journal is all set. So now we're going to make it pretty by making a cover and then ultimately decorating it. So the piece of designer series paper that you use is 8.5 inches by 12 inches. And you can see it's just going to wrap around the binding, and then it's going to leave you a 1-inch strip on the end that we can use, flip over and use for our pretty binding. So I'm going to use liquid Tombow glue, the multi-purpose glue. This is great for this project because it allows your paper to kind of wiggle still before it's dry. So when you line your paper up with the corners on that front cover, you have a little wiggle room there to get it nice and straight before you wrap it around to the back. So I'm just lining it up with the corners, and then when I get it straight, I'm going to press it into the cardstock and then fold it over the binding to the back side. And by pressing it down in the binding, then it's just going to help that back to lay nicely. So you repeat the same thing in the back. Open that back up and use your liquid glue all along that back cover. This glue is also nice as it has 2 tips, so you've got a fine tip on one edge, and I am using the wider tip that actually has a kind of a spreading surface, so it helps to spread the glue flat. So bend that around and cover up the back and press that into the cardstock. And there you go. Now you've got a covered front and a covered back. So let's take off this strip and let's use it to make our binding. You can use your paper cutter to trim this off, but I'm going to use my scissors because they're right there. What I love about the Stampin' Up's designer series paper is that it's 2-sided and it always coordinates together, so it'll just make it so pretty. Whatever paper you decide to put on your journal, to use the other side. So because this is a little piece and we're going to try to wrap it kind of tightly around the binding, I'm just using the bone folder to break down some of the fibers in that paper so that it's going to bend a little bit more easily for me when I glue it on. I'm going to use the same liquid glue. So this strip of paper ends up being about 1 inch by 8.5 inches. So let's just say you didn't want to use the designer series paper. You could always use a coordinating cardstock color to go with that, and that would work just as well. So you're going to put the binding along the middle of that piece of designer series paper, and then you're just going to bend it around the binding. And this liquid glue is really nice too. Just by using your bone folder or your fingers, the heat from your hands helps it to stay secure to the paper. So it's not like Elmer's glue that you have to hold for a long time to get it to stick. All right, so there we've got the binding on our journal. So the next thing to do would be to round the corners. And of course, that's optional. You don't have to round the corners, but it does give it a really nice finished look. So I'm taking the detailed trio punch, and 1 or 2 sheets at a time, I am just going through the journal on the outer edges and rounding those corners. I like how that looks. Okay, so the last step in this process is to decorate the front and embellish it. So I've taken some coordinating petal pink cardstock and some white, and I'm going to use the stamp set that also coordinates with this paper called Good Morning Magnolia. I'm going to take the smaller flower image and ink that in Memento ink. And then I'm going to take a greeting or an image from Colorful Seasons, and I'm going to put that on the petal pink. I liked Just Breathe for this art journal because it was reminding me as I'm doing and creating art that, you know, I need to relax and just be mindful about what I'm doing and be in the moment. So we're going to keep this really simple, and we're just going to tear around that greeting to put on the front and give it some texture. Tearing towards yourself will give you that pretty edge on the front. If you can't tear toward yourself, flip your greeting over and tear away from yourself, if that makes sense. So that's going to go on the front. And then I'm going to color the flower. I'm going to use the ink colors that coordinate, which is Mossy Meadow and Petal Pink. And just by squeezing the ink pad, I get a little bit of color on the lid so that I can use the aqua painter that has a little bit of water in it. So I'm just going to mix up the ink with a little bit of water, and I'm going to add some color to the image. Then I'm going to clean the aqua painter by squeezing some of the water out onto my clean stamping scrub, and then I'm going to go in with the Mossy Meadow ink and color the stem and the leaves. All right, all that's left is to attach our flower, figuring out where that little flower will look the best. Right there. That paper is so beautiful. That whole suite of products is so beautiful. So the last thing is to just make a little clip that'll hold the journal closed. And of course we're going to decorate that as well. So I got one of the other coordinating pieces of Designer Series paper from the Magnolia Lane Designer Series paper. It's 3/4 of an inch by 1.5 inches. I just measured around my clip. And see, if you pinch those little the little clip handles together, you can pull them out from the metal clip, and then that'll allow you to be able to bend the paper around the metal, so you can actually decorate your clip too. So I'm just going to slide this paper under where those little clips go. I don't know what you call those metal things. The whole thing's a clip, but the little ends of the binder clip. I'm just going to tuck that under there and just hold it for a minute so it adheres. And then put those clip ends back in. Just by squeezing it together, you can slide them right under the paper. And then we're going to take the ribbon and tie a bow around the end, so we have a nice little embellishment to close the journal. Just like that. Well, there you go. There is the completed art journal. And when you look inside, you'll notice there are 12 layouts that you would be able to create your art inside. And I have videos that are coming showing you some things that you can do in your art journal. So I hope that you will join me in creating some things and just having fun using the supplies that you have in your stash of craft supplies. Thank you so much for watching me today. Goodbye.